When you are desperate to get a conviction, there is one thing you might see out of a very pathetic district attorney.
And we thought we were going to expose a little bit of government corruption.
And that is to hire someone who has a bone to pick.
Little did we think that the government would expose more corruption than we ever could have.
I remember seeing this headline stating, District Attorney's Office taps Whitey Bulger's former attorney to prosecute Karen Reed the second time around. And I've sat on this info, but now it's gotten to the point where I've been watching Hank Brennan and the way that he, doesn't file affidavits so he isn't held accountable in court, i.e. he doesn't actually put any facts to his statements. And after what happened last Tuesday, I thought I should throw this out there.
The answers to who is accountable and who's responsible. That's why we called members of the FBI that the government chose not to call. People we had never even spoken to before, to get them on the stand and try to find out answers. That's why when we cross-examined witnesses, we didn't shy away from areas. We wanted to know, we knew the community wanted to know, and we knew that many of the victims' families had to know. And we did our best. At many points, we were stopped over and over again. We were prevented from bringing out information that our members of the public, our citizens, are entitled to know.
I'm sure most of you remember at least the minuscule aspects of the Whitey Bulger case. A former Irish mob boss who was on the run for decades, had some connections with the FBI. He was eventually found in California in an apartment and yada, yada, yada. And if you didn't follow his trial, they basically were stating that he wasn't a paid informant. He's the one that paid the informants? Now, it was an absolutely interesting defense, but what I will state and what I'm never ever going to disagree with, that what happened to Bulger and the feds and all those families were so fucked up. But at the end of the day, Bulger did what he did, period. From this case and from having personal experience with Whitey Bulger, Hank Brennan is throwing axes right at Karen Reed's defense. It is simply because he is biased to the fact of a federal investigation.
It was important for the jury. It was important for the community. It was important for the public to know how the federal government operated during that time and how they're operating today.
I can only imagine when Norfolk County District Attorney found out that the feds were involved in investigating the murder of Boston police officer John O'Keefe, where they hired their own experts to see what the fuck went on. Is it possible that that actually happened, that Karen ran into John with her Lexus SUV, and it was proven by biomechanics and physics and science that it's physically not possible? He needed something desperate. And in comes Hank Brennan.
Well, we expect our criminals to commit crimes. That's what criminals do. We don't expect that from our law enforcement.
But also to note, a lot of people are missing this one very specific point. Hank Brennan, as one of two main attorneys for Whitey Bulger, also was very close to Bulger's family. Whitey Bulger's brother, William Bulger, was a state senator from 1970 until 1996. Michael Morrissey was a state rep until 1990, became a senator in 1992, all the way up until the year 2000, where he then became Norfolk County's district attorney. Whitey Bulger's brother served with Michael Morrissey. That right there is a conflict.
The government pinned their hopes on these predicate offenses, in many cases, upon witnesses who we thought had an absolute lack of credibility, an extraordinary motive to lie, and were not guides that a reasonable person could follow to help find a conviction. To ask a public or a jury to trust in whole witnesses that had such promises and inducements and such motives to lie, in some ways that's reflected itself in the verdict.
I have personally watched interview after interview of Hank Brennan pre, during, post-trial, and also all the interviews that he did post Whitey Bulger's death, including a lawsuit that went up to the federal Supreme Court. This man, in interviews up until 2022, was stating his disdain for the FBI.
And anytime we saw a fallacy or a fabrication, we try to check it and counter it and show that it wasn't true. Why do I suspect it was so important to the government? Well, part of it was because of reputation and pride and public relations.
He has made it known how much he hates the feds.
There's more accountability, and our government needs to answer the hard questions that have been raised by this case. There are answers that are needed by the families and the public, that the families and the public need to keep pushing for. And so we've tried our best, and we'll keep trying the best we can. And now it's time for the public to try as well.
And now he's overseeing a trial where there are federal experts that are trying to prove Karen Reed did not hit John O'Keefe with her Lexus SUV. What do you think he's going to do with that information?
Most important part, to help show the role the government played in this entire conspiracy.
Hank Brennan, as a special prosecutor, hired by the Norfolk County District Attorney, is going to do everything in his power to say that ARCA needs to be excluded. He can't say that they're not qualified because they were already qualified in the previous trial, as well as if they want to do another voir dire, they can absolutely do that. So they're qualified. You can't say that they're not medically qualified because they're not testifying against John's specific injuries, specifically the head. So what is he going to do? He's going to try to exclude them via the defense by discovery purposes. I fully believe now that Hank Brennan was hired not to be a cheapened special prosecutor because ADA Lally fucked up so bad. No, I believe special prosecutor Hank Brennan was brought on simply because he hates the feds so much, and he's going to try everything in his power to try to make sure Karen, via discrediting the federal investigation, goes to jail.
The depth of the corruption within the Department of Justice in that time, all the way to the top, is a story that should and hopefully still will be told.
And that, my friends, is a prosecutor trying to get a conviction, not the truth.
Quite a bit about the criminal justice system and the corruptness in the Department of Justice. It doesn't begin to tell the whole story. And the government had done a number of things that we don't expect from our government. They not only created victims, but they continued to victimize the victims by denying their responsibility.